The hotel was beautiful. Tall glass doors, shiny floors, fresh flowers on every table. Rich people came and went. Their shoes clicked on the marble. Their smiles were fake, but their money was real. In one corner of the lobby, an old black woman sat quietly. Her hands rested on her lap. She wore a simple dress and held a small purse. Her hair was gray, tied neatly. Her eyes were tired, but kind. She waited. No one knew who she was. No one asked. To the staff, she was just another old lady sitting where she didn't belong. After 20 minutes, a young white man walked in. He looked around with sharp eyes and a proud face. His coat was long, and his perfume strong. He walked to the front desk and said loudly, "Why is that woman sitting there?" The receptionist looked at the old woman and frowned. "She's waiting," she said in a low voice. The man shook his head. "Well, she makes the place look messy. I need that chair." The receptionist hesitated, then called a young staff member. A boy in a tight black vest walked to the old woman. "Ma'am, we need this seat for another guest. Can you wait over there?" he said, pointing to the standing area near the door. The old woman looked up slowly. Her legs were weak. She had pain in her knees. But she didn't argue. She smiled softly and said, "Of course, dear." She stood, her hands shaking a little. No one offered to help her. She moved to the side, standing quietly, holding her purse with both hands. She didn't look upset, but her eyes said everything. She had been through worse. This was not new. Minutes passed, then more. She looked at the door every few seconds. She was waiting for someone. Still, nobody noticed her. Some staff whispered, some laughed. The receptionist leaned toward the manager and said, "Why is she even here? She doesn't look like she can afford this place." The manager nodded. "She's probably someone's driver's mother." They laughed again. Then the doors opened. A tall black man walked in. He wore a simple black suit, not flashy, not loud. He had calm eyes, a short beard, and quiet steps. He looked around once, then his eyes found her. He rushed over. "Mom," he said gently, touching her shoulder. The old woman smiled like the sun. "There you are, Marcus. I was waiting." He looked at her hands. They were cold. He looked at her feet. She had been standing too long. "Why are you standing?" he asked. She paused. They needed the seat. Marcus turned his head slowly. His eyes scanned the lobby. The receptionist looked up. She raised her eyebrow. She thought Marcus was a driver picking someone up. She waved him away with her fingers. "You can't stand here. Please wait outside." Marcus walked toward her, quiet and calm. "I'm not a driver," he said. She looked him up and down. "Then what are you?" He smiled. "Someone who just learned how you treat your guests." The manager came forward. "Sir, is there a problem?" Marcus said nothing. He simply pulled out his phone and made a call. His voice was low. "Send the boardroom keys, right now." The manager laughed nervously. "Sir, I don't think you understand." But Marcus looked up. He pointed to the name on the wall behind the front desk. It said, "The Harper Grand Hotel." He tapped the name once and said, "That's my name. Marcus D. Harper. I built this place." Everyone went silent. The receptionist froze. The manager's face turned pale. One guest dropped his drink. Marcus turned back to his mother. "Let's get you a seat, a better one." He walked her to a chair near the golden sculpture, the nicest one in the lobby. She sat slowly, her hands finally relaxed. For the first time, the staff looked at her with new eyes. Not as a poor, tired woman, but as the mother of the man who owned it all. The lobby was quiet now, much quieter than before. The guests had returned to their conversations, but there was an awkwardness in the air. The staff tried to act normal, but it was hard. The older woman, sitting in the best chair, had made them uncomfortable. They had no idea who she really was. They didn't know what was about to happen. Marcus D. Harper stood at the front desk, now in the middle of the lobby, still calm, but holding the eyes of every person there. His mother sat in the chair beside him, looking relaxed at last. But the staff, who once thought he was just a driver, were unsure of what to do next. The receptionist couldn't hide her shock. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "Sir, I'm sorry," she said, trying to smile. "I didn't know." Marcus looked at her without expression. "No, you didn't." The manager, still trying to understand what had just happened, came forward with quick steps. "Mr. Harper," he said, his voice shaky, "I think there's been some confusion." No confusion," Marcus interrupted. "You thought my mother was a nobody. You thought I was just her driver. Now, you know who I am." The manager swallowed. He looked around, his eyes darting from one staff member to the next. No one knew what to say. The pressure was growing heavier by the second. Then Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "I don't think you understand what this means." He pulled out his phone again. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he typed something. The silence in the lobby felt even thicker now. The guests watched, some of them starting to whisper. The receptionist felt the heat of embarrassment in her cheeks. She tried to keep calm, but she couldn't. "You see," Marcus continued, his voice low but clear, "this hotel, everything you see here, it's mine. I built it from nothing. And I built it for people like my mother." The manager nodded, unsure of what to do next. The receptionist took a deep breath and tried to regain her composure. I understand, Mr. Harper," she said, still sounding nervous. "But there's no need for all this. We can fix this. We'll make things right." Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked at the receptionist and then the manager, both standing in front of him, clearly nervous. They couldn't hide their fear anymore. "I'm glad you finally understand," Marcus said, then paused. "But it's not enough just to say sorry." The receptionist blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Marcus said, his voice colder now, "there are consequences for what happened here today. Not just for the staff, but for the whole hotel. How many times have people been treated like this? How many times have you ignored your guests, only to treat the ones you think matter like kings?" The silence that followed was heavy. The manager shifted his weight from one foot to the other, unsure of what to do. He had worked at this hotel for years, but this was something he never expected. Marcus turned his back on them, not waiting for a reply. "I'll be in the boardroom. You can meet me there." He didn't wait for them to say anything else. He simply walked away, heading toward the elevator. The receptionist and the manager were left standing, staring after him, still too shocked to move. They had just learned who Marcus D. Harper was, and now it was too late. Cliffhanger. Marcus reached the elevator. Pressing the button to the top floor, the staff watched him leave, feeling unsure about what was coming next. But they had no idea that Marcus wasn't done yet. The elevator doors closed softly, and Marcus D. Harper stood alone inside. His eyes were calm, but his mind was racing. The hotel lobby was now a distant memory, but what had just happened felt far from over. He had watched as the staff's expressions went from confident to terrified in seconds. The shock on their faces had been priceless, but Marcus wasn't satisfied. They needed to learn more than just his name. They needed to understand what it meant to disrespect someone, anyone, because of how they looked or where they came from. As the elevator slowly climbed, Marcus glanced at the reflection in the shiny metal walls. A man dressed in a sleek suit, his face calm, but his thoughts burning with purpose. He had spent years building his empire, brick by brick. But none of that would matter if the people who worked for him didn't understand the simple truth. Respect is earned, not given because of wealth or power. The elevator dinged as it reached the top floor, the doors sliding open to reveal a massive glass-walled boardroom. A large conference table stretched across the room, with enough chairs to fit a small army. The city's skyline lay beyond the windows, but Marcus wasn't interested in the view. He stepped into the room and walked toward the head of the table. He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he looked out the window for a moment, deep in thought. He had built all this from nothing, yes, but that was just the beginning. He had a bigger vision, a vision that went far beyond hotels and business deals. The truth was, Marcus wasn't just angry. He wasn't just frustrated by the way the staff had treated his mother. No, this went deeper. He had seen the way people like him were treated all his life. He had lived with it, fought against it, and now he was in a position to change it all. He turned and sat at the head of the table, his back straight, his hands placed neatly on the table in front of him. His calm demeanor gave nothing away, but his mind was moving fast. He took a deep breath and pressed a button on the desk. A loud beep filled the room, signaling that his assistant had received the message. Within minutes, the door opened. A young woman, dressed in a professional black dress, entered the room. She was in her early 20s, tall with dark hair pulled back into a neat bun. She didn't smile, but there was a sharpness in her eyes. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice steady. "Everything is ready." Marcus nodded. "Good. Bring them in." The assistant left the room quickly, and Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping on the table. His thoughts were still focused on what had just happened downstairs. The staff's treatment of his mother had shaken him, but it had also opened his eyes. Maybe it wasn't just about teaching them a lesson. It was about making them understand the truth of who he was and what he stood for. Minutes later, the door opened again. This time, a small group of people entered the room, all of them looking uncomfortable. They were the hotel managers, the ones who had been part of the decision to treat his mother like she didn't belong. Marcus stood slowly, his eyes scanning each of them. He could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear that had been in the staff's faces when he walked away from the lobby. One of the managers, an older man with gray hair, stepped forward. "Mr. Harper, Marcus raised his hand. "No need for apologies. I'm not here for apologies." The room fell silent. "I'm here because you don't understand," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "You don't understand what happens when you treat people based on their appearance or their background. You don't understand what it means to judge someone before you even know their name." He looked directly at the manager, the one who had told his mother to wait in the corner. "You thought my mother didn't matter. But let me tell you something. She matters. She matters more than you'll ever understand." The silence stretched on. No one dared to speak. "You see," Marcus said softly, his voice now calm again, "I didn't start with money. I didn't start with a name that everyone knew. I started with nothing. And I know what it feels like to be looked down on." He paused, letting the words sink in. The managers stood frozen, their faces pale. It was clear they were beginning to understand the weight of what he was saying. Marcus stood up and moved to the window, his hands behind his back. He stared at the city below, the same city he had worked so hard to rise above. "But I didn't stay there. I built this," he said, turning back to face them. "And I'm going to make sure no one ever feels like they don't belong again. Not here, not anywhere." The group of managers exchanged nervous glances. The truth was clear now. They had made a serious mistake, a mistake that Marcus would make sure they never repeated. "I've always believed that power comes from the people," Marcus said, his voice firm. "And I don't care how much money you have. If you don't treat people right, you have nothing." He walked to the door, opening it wide. "You can leave now. Think about what I've said. I'll see you tomorrow. And we'll talk about how to make this hotel a place where everyone feels respected." The managers didn't speak. They filed out of the room, heads down, understanding the message loud and clear. Marcus closed the door behind them, his face softening. But in his heart, the fire was still burning. This was only the beginning. The message on Marcus's phone lingered in his mind. He stared at it, his fingers tight around the device. It was short, cryptic, but clear. "We know who you are now. We won't forget it." The words sent a shiver down his spine. He had expected some reaction, but this was something else. Whoever had sent this message, they were not just watching, they were warning him. Marcus placed his phone down on the table and leaned back in his chair. The room was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you think too much. He had built an empire from the ground up. But now, it seemed like someone was making a move against him. But who? And why? A knock on the door broke the silence. Marcus didn't jump. He had been expecting someone. He had no idea who. But he knew this wasn't over yet. He stood up, his mind still turning over the message. "Come in," he called, his voice calm, despite the storm inside him. The door opened, and in walked his assistant, Sarah. Her face was tight with worry, her eyes scanning the room quickly, as if expecting something to happen. She had been with him for a long time, and she knew him well enough to see when he was troubled. "Mr. Harper," she said quietly, stepping inside, "I think you need to see this." She handed him a tablet, the screen already on. Marcus took it from her without a word and looked at the video playing. It was a grainy, shaky recording of the hotel lobby, right before his mother had been forced to stand. The camera moved around nervously, but it was clear that whoever had filmed it had made sure to capture the moment when the staff had treated his mother poorly. But it wasn't just that. At the end of the video, the camera zoomed in on the receptionist's face. She was talking to someone who wasn't on the staff, but who was clearly watching from the side. The man was wearing a dark jacket, his face covered, but his voice was unmistakable. "Let's see how he reacts," the man said, his voice low and calm, almost like a threat. "He'll be the perfect test." Marcus froze. The words echoed in his head. "He'll be the perfect test. Who is that?" Marcus whispered, barely hearing his own voice. "I don't know, sir," Sarah answered, her voice tight. "But it looks like someone's been planning this. They've been following you, watching you." Marcus ran his hand over his face, frustration boiling inside him. His mother's dignity had been disrespected, but this, whoever was behind this wasn't just after revenge. They were playing a dangerous game, and they had his attention now. He turned back to Sarah. "We need to find out who this is, right now." "Already working on it," Sarah replied, pulling out her phone and tapping quickly. "I'll have answers soon, but I think we're dealing with something bigger than we thought." Marcus stood, walking toward the window again. He needed to think. His mind raced. This wasn't just some small group out to harm him. It felt like someone with power, someone who had been planning this for a long time. He had fought his entire life to be where he was, to build something from nothing. And now, there were people trying to tear it down. But Marcus wasn't one to back down. He had worked too hard to be pushed around by shadows in the dark. "Sir," Sarah's voice broke his thoughts. "There's more. The person behind this has already reached out to several of our partners. They're trying to spread rumors. They're trying to make us look bad." Marcus turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Rumors? About what?" "About you," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with concern. "About your family. About your business." Marcus clenched his fists. This was not just a personal attack. It was an attack on everything he had built. They wanted to ruin his reputation, destroy everything he stood for. And if he didn't act quickly, it could all unravel. "Whoever this is, they're trying to send a message," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "They want me to know they're in control." Sarah nodded. "What do we do?" Marcus's lips curled into a thin smile. "We turn the tables. We show them that we're not scared. We show them that no one plays with Marcus D. Harper." He walked toward his desk, his fingers tapping quickly across the surface. The phone rang just then, the sharp sound cutting through the air. He picked it up immediately, not bothering to check the number. He knew who it was. "This is Marcus," he said, his voice cool. The voice on the other end was low and unfamiliar, but there was something chilling about it. "We know who you are now, Mr. Harper," the voice said. "You're playing a dangerous game. You should have stayed quiet." Marcus didn't flinch. "I never stay quiet." The voice chuckled softly. "We'll see how long that lasts. But you're not the only one who can control things. Be careful." The line went dead. Marcus put the phone down slowly. He didn't need anyone to tell him that things were about to get much worse. The warning had been clear, and now it was up to him to decide how far he was willing to go to protect what was his. The noise outside the door startled Marcus. It wasn't just the crash, it was the sound of something shattering. Glass. It echoed through the walls, and Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He turned to Sarah, who had already moved to the door, her face pale. "Stay here," Marcus ordered in a low voice. Sarah hesitated but nodded. She knew better than to question his command when his tone was that serious. Marcus approached the door, his footsteps heavy against the silence. His mind raced, and his instincts screamed that something was about to go horribly wrong. They had warned him. They had made it clear they weren't going to let this go, but he never imagined it would escalate this quickly. He reached for the handle and swung the door open. A group of people in dark clothing were already in the hallway. They had come fast, too fast. Marcus's first thought was that they were after him, but then he saw who they were holding. It was his mother. His heart raced as he took a step forward. His mother stood in the middle of the hallway, her face expressionless, like she was frozen. She wasn't moving, but there were 3 figures standing around her, blocking any escape. They were holding something metallic in their hands. "Let her go," Marcus yelled, stepping into the hallway. His voice was sharp, cutting through the air. The figures didn't flinch. They didn't even look at him. But one of them spoke, and Marcus immediately recognized the voice. "It's not you we're after," the voice said coldly. "But she's your weakness. And now, we'll make sure you know what it feels like to be vulnerable." Marcus clenched his fists. His blood boiled with anger. How dare they? They thought they could use his mother to get to him? This was his family, his strength. No one had the right to use her like this. "Let her go," Marcus repeated, his voice dangerous now. But the figures didn't move. Instead, the one closest to his mother stepped forward, holding out what looked like a small device. It was black, smooth, and ominous. "If you want her to live, you'll do as we say," the figure said. "We're watching you, Marcus. We know everything about you. Every move you make from now on will be under our control." Marcus took a deep breath. He had known the threats were coming. He had known they'd try to hurt him in the only way they could, through his family. But now, standing face to face with them, he knew it was time to act. There was no backing down, no more running. With one swift movement, Marcus grabbed the nearest figure by the wrist, twisting it until the figure dropped the device. The others reacted fast, trying to stop him, but Marcus was faster. He was always faster when it came to protecting his own. He shoved the man aside and stepped forward, his mother's safety his only priority. His hand reached out to her, but before he could touch her, a voice called from behind him. It wasn't one of the figures. It was the voice he had heard earlier on the phone. "Marcus," the voice said calmly. "I told you, you should have stayed quiet." Marcus turned quickly, his eyes scanning the hallway for the source, but there was no one there. The voice had come from nowhere. His muscles tensed. He knew the game had begun, and it wasn't just about his company anymore. It was about his survival. He reached for his phone, but the screen was cracked. The call had been cut off. Whoever was behind this was already one step ahead. They had planned this from the start. But Marcus wasn't ready to give up. "Take her," Marcus said to the men who had his mother surrounded. "But you better make sure you can hold on to her, because if you don't, there won't be anywhere safe for you." The figure who had spoken before looked at Marcus with cold eyes, but then something shifted. The other figures stepped back. It was like they were waiting for something. And in that moment, Marcus knew. This was just the beginning. The man who had been holding the device took a step back, his face unreadable. "You don't understand," he said slowly. "We're not after her anymore. We're after you." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. His eyes narrowed. Everything had changed. What had started as an attack on his mother was now a personal war against him. He wasn't just going to play their game, he was going to change the rules. Suddenly, Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out quickly, hoping for answers, but what he saw froze him in place. It was an image, a picture of his office. No, it was his home, surrounded by black cars, dark figures waiting for him. A chill ran down his spine. They were everywhere, and they were watching. Cliffhanger. Marcus looked back at the men holding his mother, his heart racing. They had thought they were in control, but Marcus was about to show them how dangerous a cornered man could be. The air was thick with tension as Marcus stood frozen in the hallway, his eyes fixed on the group of men who had taken his mother. His phone still buzzed in his hand, but he didn't move. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to act, but he needed a plan. He needed to think. The men had retreated, but they hadn't left. They were still there, lurking, waiting for him to make his next move. Marcus knew they wouldn't give up. He had seen the look in their eyes, their cold, calculating eyes. This was no longer just about power or control. This was personal. "What do you want from me?" Marcus finally asked, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the silence. One of the men, the one who had spoken earlier, stepped forward again. "We want you, Marcus," he said slowly. "We've been watching you for a long time. Every move you make, every deal you sign, it all leads to this moment." Marcus clenched his fists. He wanted to lash out, to strike back, but he couldn't let his anger cloud his judgment. Not yet. He needed to get his mother out of this. He needed to protect her. He glanced at his phone again. The image of his home surrounded by dark cars, figures watching from every corner, sent a cold chill through him. He wasn't safe here. He wasn't safe anywhere. "Where is she?" Marcus demanded. His voice was a growl now, filled with fear and anger. "Where's my mother?" "She's safe for now," the man said with a smirk. "But how long that will last depends on you." Marcus took a deep breath. He had to stay calm. He had to think. His mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan. The man with the device had stepped back, but now he pulled something else from his pocket. A small black chip. Marcus's heart skipped a beat when he saw it. It was a tracking device. They had been tracking him. They knew where he was going, and now they were taking his family to force him to follow their commands. "You really thought you were untouchable?" the man asked, his voice taunting. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Marcus." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. His thoughts were focused on one thing: getting his mother out of there. He couldn't let them use her against him. He had to make a move, and fast. "I'm not afraid of you," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "You can hurt me. You can even take her. But if you think I'm going to bow down to you, you're wrong. This ends tonight." The man laughed. It was a cold, humorless laugh that sent shivers down Marcus's spine. "It's already begun, Marcus. There's no way out of this. You can run, you can hide, but we'll always find you." Marcus's mind was racing as he tried to come up with a plan. He had to act fast. His mother was in danger, and the longer he waited, the harder it would be to save her. He couldn't afford to hesitate. He looked back at the hallway, noticing the shadows growing longer. He wasn't alone. There were more men, more eyes watching him. It was like they were closing in, tightening the noose around him. He had to break free, but how? Then he remembered something his father had once told him. "When you're trapped, when the walls are closing in, don't look for a way out. Make your own way." It clicked. He wasn't going to wait for them to make the next move. He was going to take control. "Give me a minute," Marcus said suddenly, his voice calm. He turned and began walking toward the stairwell, his mind already working on the next steps. The men didn't move. They were waiting. They didn't believe he would run. But Marcus wasn't running. He was thinking. He reached the stairwell and started up the steps, each one echoing in the silent building. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. His plan was already in motion. Behind him, the men stood still, watching him. They believed they had the upper hand, but they didn't know Marcus. They didn't know what he was capable of when he was pushed to the edge. As he reached the top of the stairs, Marcus pulled out his phone again. The screen flickered to life, and he quickly opened a secure app, sending a message with only one word: prepare. He knew what was coming. He knew that whatever he did next, there would be no turning back. The game had begun, and Marcus was ready to play. The silence in the building felt suffocating as Marcus moved through the dark corridors. His footsteps were the only sound that echoed against the walls, but in his mind, everything was chaos. He could feel the eyes of his enemies on him, tracking his every move. But he didn't care anymore. He was done playing their game. He had to end this, and he had to end it now. His phone buzzed again, breaking his thoughts. He pulled it out quickly, checking the secure message that had just arrived. The word "ready" flashed on the screen, and a small grin crossed Marcus's face. His team was in position. The trap was set. But he still had to get through the men who had his mother, and that wasn't going to be easy. Marcus reached the top floor of the building, where he knew his enemies were waiting. His body tensed. The final showdown was about to begin. The air was thick with tension, and he could almost hear the footsteps of the men closing in behind him. He pushed open the door at the end of the hall. Inside, the room was empty, but he knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The sound of footsteps grew louder. The men were closing in. Marcus's heart raced as he took a deep breath and adjusted his stance. He had been through worse. This wasn't the first time he had been backed into a corner, and it wouldn't be the last. The door behind him slammed shut with a loud bang. He turned, seeing the group of men entering the room. They were armed, their eyes cold and determined. The leader, the one who had been taunting him all along, stepped forward. "You've made a mistake, Marcus," the man said, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can win this? It's over." Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small device. He pressed a button, and the room filled with the sound of a quiet hum. For a brief moment, the men looked confused, but the leader's eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" the man demanded. "You'll see," Marcus replied with a cold smile. Suddenly, the walls around them seemed to pulse. A deep rumble shook the building, followed by a series of loud crashes from the lower levels. The lights flickered, then went out completely. The entire building was plunged into darkness. The men's eyes widened. Panic began to spread. "Where is she?" Marcus asked, his voice low and dangerous. The leader took a step back, his eyes darting nervously around the dark room. But before he could answer, Marcus made his move. He launched himself at the leader, knocking him to the ground. The other men rushed forward, but Marcus was faster. He took down the first two in a blur of movement. The remaining men hesitated, unsure whether to continue the fight or retreat. But Marcus wasn't giving them a choice. "Move!" he shouted, as he knocked out another one of the men. "Now!" The remaining men scrambled, trying to regain control. But Marcus wasn't going to let that happen. He fought with everything he had, his anger and fear driving him to go harder, faster. He couldn't lose his mother. Not now. Not after everything he had been through. Finally, the last man standing, the one who had been closest to his mother, fell to the ground with a thud. The room fell silent. Breathing heavily, Marcus looked around, his heart pounding. The fight was over. But the battle wasn't won yet. He turned toward the corner of the room where he knew they had been keeping his mother. The door was locked, but that wasn't going to stop him. He kicked it open with one powerful strike, and there she was, his mother, sitting quietly in a chair, her hands bound, but alive. "Mom!" Marcus breathed, rushing to her side. Her eyes flickered open at the sound of his voice. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice weak. He kneeled beside her, cutting through the ropes that held her. "I'm here, Mom. You're safe now." She smiled faintly, but the relief in her eyes was unmistakable. Marcus pulled her into a tight hug. The world around him might have been falling apart, but in that moment, he didn't care. His mother was safe, and that was all that mattered. The lights flickered back on, and Marcus looked around the room. The men were down, but he knew they weren't the only ones who wanted him gone. This was far from over. But for now, he had won, and that was enough.